He's 7 inches tall. Grant is expected to try to dominate from the outside with his jab. Teddy Atlas insists that he's getting better all the time at fighting on the inside, too.
Step out, let's go. We're working it. Right, break.
In our meetings with both fighters yesterday, Dominick Guinn exceptionally calm. A guy with an extremely even disposition. The only time during the conversation he got excited was when talking about an incident as a teenager in which he was shot in the leg and his arrest for illegal ownership of guns. He had a very brief reform school or prison stint, I should say, as the result of that. And he lands a left hook here that knocks Grant back into the corner.
Grant is very, very uncoordinated once you get in close to him. And seemingly such a relaxed guy. He just doesn't seem to have the fire.
And Guinn lands a right hand, and Grant wobbles against the ropes. Grant trying to duck and slip.
Well, Guinn is taking these punches well, but he's taking too many of them this early in the fight.
It doesn't look good for him. Not only is he getting hit a lot, but his coordination is just entirely too slow. And he doesn't seem to have that spiritual, competitive spirit that seems to be necessary for him to be a top fighter.
When Michael Grant was on his way to that title shot against Lennox Lewis, he did show in several of his fights unusual athletic skills for a man so big. They seem to have vanished the moment Lennox hit him on the chin. Emmanuel, is that all about confidence?
I think it just his mental makeup to me has never been that of a big-time fighter. He seems to be too passive.
Well, Teddy Alpha says, we don't want you to be a passenger. We want you to drive the car. And that's another way of saying what you just said, Emmanuel.
Yes.
Listen, it's very simple. It's not complicated. You listen? How you feel? You brought your good right hand because you let him walk right into your front door. Rinse this off. Don't let him walk into your front door. The time to punch is when he's outside, to keep him outside. You had your left hand down, you're a little bit too tall, and you let him walk right in that front door. Listen, if you're afraid of...
Stay close to him. Every time you get close to him, shoot that overhand right. Come back with the hook and back with the right hand again, okay? Now, you hurt this guy. You understand? You hurt this guy. That's all. He's looking for one shot, and that's the overhand right, okay? He's looking to counter you, all right?
Once Guinn gets inside, you see him hitting with Grant, and Grant really can't coordinate himself enough to deal with those punches once he gets inside too much.
Let's go, Teddy.
CompuBox numbers in round one. Grant landing 5 out of 29 for 17%. Guinn 8 out of 28. Grant just 2 of 15 jabs. The 2 big punches in the round you saw in replay, a right and a left from Guinn.
Step out, go, step out. Mike, step out. Oh. Come on, Mike.
Big guys are big targets. And against quicker opponents, they often don't see the punches coming. That's why the best of the really big heavyweights of the modern era usually are counter punches.
Watch your heads, watch your heads, watch your heads. Let's go. Come on, guys. No. Get him out, no punching.
Well, you heard Teddy Atlas advising Grant that he had to be more engaged, more alert. Can't allow Guinn to simply walk in the front door, as he said. Grant can't seem to initiate. He can't seem to start things off and try to put the other fighter on the defensive.
No, and he's fighting such a basic fight. He basically tries to throw a jab and then maybe throw a right hand. But outside of that, he hasn't really put too many other punches together.
Threw a couple of nice lefts on the inside, one to the head and one to the body.
But so many things he should be doing with his jab.
Let him go, nice and clean.
Crowd begins to boo. Grant from nearby Norristown, Pennsylvania. might have hoped to have something of a home court advantage against Guinn.
If Grant would just even be physical, be a lot more physical and use his strength a lot, he could maybe exert more control over the fight and take an advantage. But at this stage, he throws 1 or 2 punches. And when he goes into a clinch, he starts looking out in the crowd. He's looking at his corner. Seems to lose his focus often once he gets inside.
Now Grant puts together a right and a left hand.
That was some pretty good inside work there.
Good inside punching there.
Since falling to Jameel McCline nearly 2 years ago, Grant has won 7 consecutive fights, but as I mentioned, against very nondescript opposition. This, the biggest showcase since the loss to McCline.
Grant is one of the biggest heavyweights in boxing, and he's boxing one of the smaller heavyweights in boxing. If he would just be a lot more physical, I think, and have a more of aggressive attitude, he could easily win this fight.
5 seconds.
Second round coming to a close. Michael Grant diffident through the first 2 rounds against Dominick Guinn, but better in the second than in the first.
Sit down, listen now. Now listen, he caught you in that first round. You got through that. You're together now, am I right? You're all together. Now listen to me.
On July 12, World Championship Boxing brings you the rematch between welterweight champion Ricardo Mayorga and Vernon Forrest. In their first fight, Mayorga scored a shocking 3rd round knockout in Temecula, California. Now he'll give Forrest a chance to avenge that defeat and regain the welterweight championship in the process. 2 weeks later, on Boxing After Dark, Fernando Vargas returns to the ring for the first time since his knockout loss to Oscar De La Hoya. Vargas will be taking on Fitz Vanderpool. HBO, for 30 years, building legends 1 round at a time. At ringside tonight, Lennox Lewis, having come in from his training camp in the Poconos after getting word yesterday that Kirk Johnson was out of their June 21 fight with a torn muscle. Lewis here, as part of an effort to do some business and perhaps put June 21 back together. We'll be talking to him live between fights. CompuBox numbers for 2 rounds sound like the numbers for 1 round. Grant 12 out of 57, Guinn 11 out of 51. Grant just landed a solid left hook to the chest of Guinn.
Come on, hands are free, working it. Bring, no punch, no punch, no punch.
If Michael keeps working that jab like that, he'll land his right hand.
And he just did.
Yeah, if he keeps working his jab, get him out there preoccupied with the jab, he'll land the right hand.
Those 15 seconds were like a textbook of what Grant should try to do offensively. Work behind the jab and bring the right hand behind it.
Work behind the jab, and at this stage, Guinn seems to have lost his momentum. He's moving in, but he's not punching as he moves in.
Guinn misses a right hand, and Grant lands an uppercut in return. Not a big one, just putting leather on him. Little left lands for Grant. Much more confident now than he was in round 1.
Much more focused too.